Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really powerful framework for understanding and, more importantly, overcoming addiction, all based on a raw, firsthand account of recovery. And it all kicks off with this really stark choice, right? The author of the work we're looking at, he talks about being in the grip of what he calls the dragon, an addiction that almost cost him everything. For him, this quote isn't just some nice saying. It's the very heart of his story, a story that serves as a kind of blueprint for how to fight back. So where did it all begin for him? Well, it actually started in childhood, with food. He talks about this emotional void, from a really complicated family life, and he used binge eating to try and fill that emptiness. Then, as a teenager, things escalated. He was looking for a way to deal with all this anger and frustration at home, and he and a friend found it in smoking cigarettes. They just burned through packs, venting about their lives. And you know how these things can go. Those smoking sessions didn't stay just smoking sessions for long. Pretty soon, it turned into all-night parties, fueled by alcohol. And at the time, it felt amazing. It was rebellious, exciting, and for the first time, it felt like freedom. But that feeling didn't last. The buzz from alcohol just wasn't enough to quiet his mind anymore. He describes needing to be, and this is a quote, consciously unconscious. And that search, well, that's what led him down the path to harder substances and a decade-long battle that completely spiraled out of control. Okay, so that whole downward spiral, it perfectly sets up our first section, really trying to understand the powerful emotional reality of what it's like to be trapped by addiction. So what exactly is this trap? Is it just a bad habit, a moral failing? Our next section explores how the brain itself builds this kind of invisible cage. And, more importantly, how a totally new way of looking at it might just be the key to unlocking it. For so long, the story we've been told about addiction is that it's one of two things. Either you're sick with a disease, or you're bad. And both of those labels, they just leave people feeling completely hopeless. Like it's this permanent stain on their character they can never, ever wash away. But what if there's another way to look at it? Our source proposes reframing addiction as a behavioral allocation disorder, or to put it simply, a bad habit. Now, this model says it's not a moral flaw and it's not some incurable disease. It's a deeply, deeply learned behavior that's just gone haywire, a powerful pattern that's been etched into the brain's wiring. And this slide really breaks down that shift in thinking. On one side, you've got the old model of shame, the idea that it's all about willpower. But on the other side, you have this new model of action and retraining. And this is so huge because it changes the goal from fixing a broken person to retraining a capable brain. Okay, so if addiction is a learned behavior, that's actually really good news, right? Because it means it can be unlearned. And this next section is all about providing a map for that exact journey. And here's the key idea. You don't have to conquer this whole mountain in one go. The path to recovery is actually broken down into these manageable phases, which makes the entire process feel way less overwhelming and, honestly, a lot more achievable. And here it is. The Stages of Change model lays out that path so clearly. It starts with pre-contemplation. That's when someone might not even see there's a problem. Then you move into contemplation and preparation, where the idea of changing starts to become real. The heavy lifting starts in the action phase and gets solidified in maintenance, until you finally reach termination, where those old habits just don't have the same power over you anymore. All right, a map is a fantastic start, but you also need some tools to actually navigate the journey, right? So in our next section, we're going to dig into how you can literally start forging new pathways in your brain. I love this quote. Our brains are not clay, they're more like Play-Doh. It's such a perfect way to introduce the science of neuroplasticity. This is the incredible, scientifically backed idea that your brain isn't set in stone. It can physically change, it can adapt, it can remap itself based on what you do and what you think. And this is basically how it works. Think of your habits like roads in your brain. The more you travel down a road, the wider and faster it gets. Addiction basically builds a superhighway. But here's the amazing part. Neuroplasticity means you can choose to build a new highway. And if you keep practicing, keep taking that new route, it'll eventually become your brain's new default path. So let's get practical. What do you do in the moment when a craving hits you like a tidal wave? Well, instead of trying to fight it head-on, which is exhausting, there's this mindfulness technique called urge surfing. The whole idea is to simply observe the urge and ride it out, knowing that, like all waves, it will eventually pass. And this is literally how you do it. It's a super simple 4-step process. First, you just sit and breathe. Then you start to notice the physical feelings of that craving, but, and this is key, without judging them. You're not fighting it, you're just watching it, imagining it cresting and falling like a wave, until eventually it subsides. Okay, last section. Let's talk about maybe the single biggest emotional hurdle that keeps people stuck, even when they have the map and the tools. Let's talk about shame. Yeah, shame is so insidious. It's that little voice in your head that tells you that you are fundamentally broken, that you're not worthy of getting better. And that feeling can make it seem absolutely impossible to even take that first step towards healing. And this distinction right here is everything. Guilt versus shame. Guilt is about your actions. It says, I did a bad thing. That's something you can learn from, something you can change. But shame attacks your very identity. It says, I am a bad person. See the difference? It's huge. So the only way forward, the only way to break that shame spiral is by learning to separate what you've done from who you are. It's about practicing self-forgiveness and really accepting that your past doesn't have to define your future. That's how you take away shame's power and finally start writing a new story for yourself. And really, that's what this all comes down to. It's about recognizing that no matter how ingrained the old story is, you always have the power to pick up the pen and start a brand new chapter.